6 days passed before the trial reconvened. In that time, the galaxy had been in turmoil. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. The corrupted council members faced their own trials. Thelvos was formally charged with war crimes, the very accusation he had tried to pin on Una. The new council panel consisted of 4 judges chosen for their neutrality. None had been involved in the war. None had connections to either humanity or the Vryn. They were respected across the galaxy for their fairness. The lead judge was a Silrim, elder named Vosh. Her species was known for their wisdom and their ability to see multiple perspectives. When she spoke, her words carried weight. This council has reviewed all evidence from both the original trial and the subsequent revelations. Vosh began. We have examined military records, intercepted communications, and testimony from hundreds of witnesses. We understand the context of the war and Captain Kim's actions within it. Una sat at the defense table, Minho beside her. The young lawyer had grown more confident over the past week. He had given several interviews where he spoke passionately about justice and truth. People were calling him a hero, though he always directed credit to Una. However, Vosh continued, questions remain, not about guilt or innocence, but about the nature of war itself. Captain Kim, this council requests your continued testimony, not to prosecute you, but to understand. Una stood and walked to the witness stand. She had aged visibly over the past week. The stress of the trial, combined with bringing up 50-year-old memories, had taken its toll, but her eyes remained clear and focused. What would you like to understand? Una asked. Vosh looked at her with something like sympathy. You saved your species. No one disputes this now, but the cost was enormous. How do you live with that burden? The question hung in the air. It was not a legal question, but a human one. The gallery leaned forward to hear the answer. Una was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than before. You want to know how I live with it? The truth is, I do not live with it. I carry it. Every day, every hour. It is a weight that never lessens. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small data pad. May I show you something? Vosh nodded. Una activated the pad and the holographic display changed. Instead of military records or battle footage, it showed something unexpected. Pages and pages of handwritten text, names, dates, personal details. These are my journals, Una explained. I have kept them for 50 years. Every person who died under my command I recorded. Their name, their age, their family. Whether they were human or Vryn, soldier or civilian, everyone. She scrolled through the pages. Thousands of them. The gallery watched in silence as the names scrolled by. An endless river of the dead. Lieutenant Junho Park, aged 23, killed at Proxima Station. He had a wife and a daughter he never met. Private Soman Lee, aged 19, died when her ship was destroyed. She wanted to be a teacher after the war. Commander Vectos of the Vryn fleet, age 47, killed in the asteroid field. He had 3 children waiting for him at home. Una's voice remained steady as she read, but her hands trembled slightly. I know all of them. Every single person who died because of my orders. I write letters to their families, letters I can never send because most would not want to hear from me. But I write them anyway. She looked up at the judges. You ask how I live with the burden? I do not try to justify it. I do not make excuses. I simply remember. It is the least I can do for them. A woman stood up in the gallery. She was human, perhaps in her 30s, with red eyes from crying. Captain Kim, I am Hana, your niece. Una's composure cracked slightly. Hana, you should not be here. Yes, I should, Hana said firmly. She looked at the judges. May I speak? Vosh nodded. Please. Hana walked to the front of the chamber. My aunt is a hero to humanity. We built statues of her. We named schools and stations after her, but she refused all of it. After the war, she disappeared. She lived alone in a small house on the edge of nowhere. She refused to see family. She turned down every honor, every medal, every recognition. Tears ran down Hana's face as she spoke. I did not understand why when I was young. I thought she was just sad about the war. But now I understand. She was punishing herself. For 50 years she has been alone with her guilt, with her memories, with the weight of every decision she made. Hana turned to Una. You saved us. You saved Earth. You saved billions of lives. But you never let yourself feel proud of that. You only remember the cost. Una closed her eyes. The cost matters more than the victory. Why? Vosh asked gently. Why does it matter more? Because victories are remembered but costs are forgotten, Una replied. People celebrate what was won and ignore what was lost. They build statues and forget that every statue represents thousands of graves. I refuse to forget. Someone has to remember. She opened her eyes and looked at the journal still displayed in the hologram. During the war, I had access to the Nova devices. Planet-killing weapons. Do you know why I did not use them? The chamber waited for her answer. Because I knew their names, Una said simply. Not just the names of the dead, but the names of those who would die. The Vryn civilians on their homeworld. The families. The children. I knew that if I used those weapons, I would spend the rest of my life writing their names in journals. Billions of names. A burden too heavy even for me to carry. She gestured at the displayed pages. These journals are already too long. Too many names. Too many lives ended. But at least these deaths had purpose. At least they were soldiers, or unfortunate civilians caught in military crossfire. If I had used the Nova devices, the names would have been innocents murdered for convenience. I could not do that. I could not become the monster they feared. Vosh and the other judges were silent. Even the gallery, usually restless, sat in complete stillness. Una's words had stripped away any remaining pretense. This was not about law or politics anymore. It was about the human cost of inhuman decisions. So yes, Una continued. I destroyed ships. I killed soldiers. I made choices that haunt me, but every choice was made with full knowledge of the cost. Every order was given with the understanding that I would remember every consequence forever. She closed the journal display and looked at the judges. You want to judge me? Then judge this. I had the power to end the war in a day by committing genocide. I chose a harder path that cost more human lives but spared the enemy. I won the war while refusing to become what we were fighting against. If that makes me a criminal, then your laws value the dead over the living. A Vryn stood up in the gallery. He was old, his crystalline skin cloudy with age. Captain Kim, I am Sorvek. I served in the fleet at Proxima. You destroyed my ship. My crew died. I survived only by luck. Everyone tensed, expecting anger or accusation, but Sorvek bowed deeply. I have hated you for 50 years. But today I learned my name is in your journal. You remember my crew. You remember me. And I learned something else. You could have killed us all. Every Vryn, you had the means. But you did not, he straightened, tears in his 4 eyes. I came here wanting to see you punished. But now I see you have punished yourself far more than any court could. Thank you for remembering my crew. Thank you for carrying their names when I could not. Other Vryn in the gallery stood. Not all of them, but many. They bowed toward Una, acknowledging what she had chosen not to do to them. Una's face remained expressionless, but those who knew her could see the emotion she was suppressing. 50 years of isolation, 50 years of carrying guilt alone, and finally someone understood. Vosh spoke softly. Captain Kim, this council has reached a decision. But first I must ask, do you regret your actions at Proxima Station? Una thought carefully before answering. I regret that they were necessary. I regret every life lost, but I do not regret choosing to save Earth. I do not regret refusing to use genocide as a weapon, and I do not regret surviving to remember those who did not. She paused, then added, if I could go back knowing everything I know now, I would make the same choices, not because they were easy, but because they were right. The burden I carry is proof that I understand the weight of command. The journals I keep are proof that I never forgot it was people who died, not just numbers. Vosh nodded slowly. Then this council is ready to deliver our verdict. The second day of the trial began with more people in the gallery than before. News of Una's promise to testify had spread across the galaxy overnight. Every major news network carried the trial live. Betting pools had started on dozens of worlds, wagering on the outcome. Una entered the chamber the same way she had the day before. Calm. Composed. Silent. She took her place at the defense table while Minho shuffled his papers. Nervously beside her, Delvo stood immediately, not waiting for the chairman to call the session to order. Before the defendant speaks, the council must see the full evidence of her crimes. The holographic display activated again, larger this time. It filled the center of the chamber with images that made even hardened veterans look away. The Battle of Proxima Station had been brutal, and Thelvos intended to show every terrible moment. "This is the transport vessel Mercy Light," he said, highlighting one ship in the display. A medical frigate clearly marked with healing symbols. Captain Kim ordered its destruction. 3,000 medical personnel died instantly. The image zoomed in, showing the ship breaking apart under weapons fire. Escape pods launched too late, most of them consumed by secondary explosions. "This is the civilian station Harmony Rest," Thelvos continued, "home to 50,000 non-combatants, families, children, elderly who had retired there for peace. Captain Kim's forces reduced it to debris. More images. More death." The gallery sat in stunned silence as the prosecutor built his case piece by piece. He showed communication logs where the Vryn fleet had attempted to surrender, only to be ignored. He played audio of screaming that the translators struggled to convert into understandable sounds. And finally, Thelvos said, his voice rising with emotion, "We have testimony from survivors." A Vryn male materialized in holographic form. His name appeared beneath him, Kelzan, former soldier. His crystalline skin was cracked and scarred, his 4 eyes dull with remembered trauma. "I served in the 3rd Defense Fleet at Proxima," the recording began. "We were retreating. Our weapons were depleted. We had signaled surrender on all frequencies. But Captain Kim's forces did not stop. They hunted us through the asteroid field like animals. My squadron of 42 ships was reduced to 3. I watched my brothers die, their final screams echoing over our communications." The recording shifted to another survivor, then another. Each told stories of ruthless efficiency, of human forces that showed no mercy, of a commander who ordered the destruction of anything that moved. Minho tried to object several times, but the chairman allowed the testimony to continue. The galaxy needed to see this, needed to understand the scope of the accusations. After 2 hours of testimony, Thelvos finally sat down. The chamber felt heavy with the weight of so much death. Even the humans in the gallery looked shaken. They had known Yuna was a war hero, but seeing the reality of war laid bare was different from celebrating victory parades. "The defense may now respond," the chairman said. Minho stood, clearing his throat. His voice was stronger than yesterday, but he still seemed young and outmatched. "Honored counsel, everything the prosecutor has shown you is true. Captain Kim does not deny the destruction at Proxima Station, but you must understand the context." He activated his own display showing star maps. When Captain Kim arrived at Proxima, humanity was losing the war. The Vryn had already destroyed 15 human colonies. Earth itself was threatened. Proxima Station was our last defensive position between the Vryn fleet and our homeworld. The map showed the progression of the war, how the Vryn advance had pushed humanity back system by system. The human territory had shrunk like a dying star, contracting toward Earth. "The Vryn started this war without warning," Minho continued. "They attacked our colonies with the same ruthlessness they now condemn. New Sol Colony, population wiped out. Hanguk Station, no survivors. The attacks were systematic, designed to break humanity's will to resist." Thelvos jumped to his feet. "This is exactly the irrelevant deflection I predicted. The defendant's crimes cannot be excused by pointing at other crimes." "But it provides context," Minho argued. Captain Kim was facing an existential threat to her entire species. She made the choices necessary for survival. "Survival does not justify genocide," Thelvos shot back. The 2 lawyers argued while Yuna sat quietly, watching the council members. She could read their body language, the small signs that showed which way they were leaning. 3 were already convinced of her guilt. 2 were uncertain. 2 might listen to reason. She needed all of them to understand. The chairman finally called for order. "The council has seen the evidence from both sides. Does the defendant wish to add anything before we move to testimony?" Yuna stood slowly, every eye in the chamber fixed on her. The media drones moved closer, their lenses focusing. Across the galaxy, billions of beings stopped what they were doing to watch. "Yes," she said simply. "I wish to testify now." Thelvos looked triumphant. He thought she would dig her own grave with words. The chairman nodded and gestured to the witness stand. Yuna walked to the center of the chamber. The holographic display deactivated, leaving her alone under the lights. She placed one hand on the oath scanner, a device that would alert the council if she lied. "Captain Yuna Kim," the chairman began formally. "Do you swear to speak truthfully before this council?" "I do." You have seen the evidence against you.
How do you plead to these charges?
Yuna looked up at the 7 council members. Then she turned slowly, looking at every face in the gallery. Humans, Vryn, Torvek, Silrim, species she had fought with and against. Finally, she looked at the media drones, knowing that the galaxy was watching. I plead not guilty, she said clearly, and I request permission to address each charge individually with evidence. Telvos made a dismissive gesture. What evidence could possibly excuse what we have seen? Yuna's expression did not change. The truth. Something this trial has been missing since it began. The chairman looked interested now. Proceed, Captain Kim. Yuna pulled out a data chip from her pocket. Minho looked surprised. She had not told him about this. Security drones scanned it immediately for weapons or viruses. It was clean, containing only files. Load this into the court system, Yuna said. The chairman hesitated, then nodded. A technician took the chip and inserted it into the main computer. New images appeared in the holographic display, replacing the prosecutor's evidence. Let's start with the medical frigate Mercy Light, Yuna began. Her voice was calm, almost casual, as if discussing the weather. The prosecutor showed you its destruction. What he did not show you was this. The display zoomed in on the Mercy Light before its destruction. Yuna's files showed energy readings, weapons signatures, manufacturing outputs that came from within the supposedly peaceful medical ship. This medical frigate was producing biological weapons, Yuna said flatly. Diseases designed to target human DNA specifically. My intelligence team intercepted communications between the ship and Vryn Military Command. They were 3 days away from deploying these weapons on Earth. The gallery erupted. Telvos began shouting objections. The chairman called for order, but chaos had already taken hold. Yuna stood calmly at the center of it all, waiting for the storm to pass. When silence finally returned, she continued. I have intercepted communications. I have energy signatures. I have testimonies from Vryn scientists who defected after the war. All of it proves that the Mercy Light was a military target disguised as a medical vessel. It was a war crime, but not mine. She looked directly at Telvos. Would you like me to continue? Or shall we discuss the other accusations now? The chamber remained in chaos for several minutes. Council members argued among themselves. Telvos demanded the evidence be thrown out. Minho looked shocked that Yuna had kept these files secret even from him. The chairman repeatedly called for order, his voice growing more frustrated with each attempt. Finally, silence returned. Yuna still stood at the witness stand, her posture relaxed as if she had all the time in the world. The oath scanner beside her showed steady green, indicating no deception in her previous statements. The evidence will be examined, the chairman declared. Captain Kim, you may continue. Yuna nodded and gestured to the holographic display. New images appeared, showing Harmony Rest Station from different angles. The prosecutor called this a civilian station with 50,000 non-combatants. Let me show you what Harmony Rest really was. The display shifted to show the station's power output, energy readings that were far too high for a simple civilian habitat, weapons emplacements hidden within what looked like communication arrays, docking bays filled with military vessels disguised with civilian transponders. Harmony Rest was a military staging ground, Yuna explained. The Vryn used it to launch raids on human supply lines. They painted it as civilian infrastructure to prevent us from attacking it. A shield of innocence to hide their warriors. She pulled up communication intercepts, showing orders from Vryn Military Command to troops stationed at Harmony Rest. Attack patterns, supply requisitions for weapons, casualty reports from successful raids against human forces. When I destroyed Harmony Rest, there were military personnel aboard. Yes, there were also civilians. But those civilians were there because the Vryn military put them there, knowing it would make us hesitate. It was a strategy of using the innocent as armor. Telvos stood again, his crystalline skin pulsing with dark colors that indicated rage. This is propaganda, fabricated evidence to justify murder. Is it? Yuna asked calmly. She looked at one of the council members, a Silrim who had remained neutral so far. Counselor Vesh, your species has advanced scanning technology. Would you examine my files? Verify if they have been altered or fabricated? The Silrim considered for a moment, then nodded. A team of technicians came forward and began analyzing Yuna's data. The process took 20 minutes while the chamber waited in tense silence. Finally, Counselor Vesh spoke. The files are authentic. There is no evidence of fabrication or alteration. These communications and energy readings are genuine. Telvos looked as if he had been struck. Murmurs ran through the gallery. The three council members who had seemed certain of Yuna's guilt now looked uncertain. Yuna continued methodically. She addressed each piece of evidence the prosecutor had shown. The surrender signals that were actually jamming attempts. The destroyed ships that had been carrying invasion troops, not refugees. The civilian casualties that were soldiers using civilian identification. With each revelation, the picture changed. The ruthless war criminal began to look like a commander, making impossible choices in desperate circumstances. The gallery's mood shifted, confusion replacing certainty. But what about the banned weapons? Telvos demanded, grasping at his remaining accusations. You deployed experimental technology that violated galactic conventions. You cannot deny this. Yuna smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're right. I did use experimental weapons at Proxima Station. Would you like to know why? She did not wait for an answer. The display changed again, showing Earth, beautiful and blue, hanging in space like a jewel. Then the view pulled back, showing the Vryn fleet approaching. Thousands of ships, enough to turn the planet to glass. This was the situation when I arrived at Proxima, Yuna said quietly. The Vryn fleet was 3 days from Earth. Our defenses were shattered. We had no allies, no reinforcements, no hope. Command gave me authorization to use any means necessary to stop them. The display showed documents, command codes, authorization from the highest levels of human government. Everything was legitimate if desperate. The experimental weapons I used were plasma disruptors, Yuna continued. Yes, they were banned by galactic law, but that law was written by species who had never faced extinction. That law assumed both sides would follow rules. The Vryn broke those rules first when they attacked our colonies without warning. She turned to face Telvos directly. You want to punish me for using banned weapons? Then punish your own people for starting a war of extermination. You want to call me a war criminal? Fine, but understand what that means. Yuna's voice grew harder, louder, filling the chamber with quiet intensity. I am standing here in this court, being judged by representatives of species I fought against. You are alive. Your worlds are intact. Your families sleep safely in their homes. Do you know why? The question hung in the air. Everyone waited for the answer. Because I chose mercy, Yuna said. Because I am not the monster you want me to be. She activated a new file, and the display showed something that made everyone in the chamber freeze. It was a weapon schematic, simple in design but devastating in purpose. The humans in the gallery recognized it immediately. The aliens needed only a moment to understand what they were seeing. This is the Nova device, Yuna said. A weapon capable of destroying a planet. Not just the surface, but cracking the core. Turning a world into an asteroid field. Earth built 3 of them as a last resort. I had access to all 3 at Proxima Station. The implication crashed over the chamber like a wave. Telvos' skin went pale, his 4 eyes wide with shock. Yuna continued, her voice steady. If I were the war criminal you claim, I would have used these weapons. The Vryn homeworld, your colony worlds, your military bases. I could have ended your entire species in a day. She paused, letting that sink in. But I didn't. Instead, I used precise strikes against military targets. I destroyed your fleet at Proxima and forced a surrender. I saved billions of Vryn lives by choosing restraint over revenge. The chamber was completely silent. Even the media drones seemed to hover motionlessly as if afraid to break the moment. So yes, Yuna said, looking at each council member in turn. I destroyed your ships. I killed your soldiers. I used banned weapons to stop an invasion that would have wiped out my entire species. And I would do it all again without hesitation. She delivered her final statement with absolute certainty. You label me a war criminal because I won. Because I did what was necessary to protect my people. But if I truly were a war criminal, none of you would be alive to judge me. If I had wanted genocide, I had the power to achieve it. The fact that you are sitting here, breathing, thinking, accusing me, is proof that I chose a different path. Yuna looked directly at Telvos. You want to know the difference between us? When you had the advantage, you tried to exterminate humanity. When I had the advantage, I stopped at victory. That is why I am here and you are there. That is why humans are called merciful and you are remembered as invaders. She turned back to the chairman. I have committed many sins in my life. I have killed and destroyed and made choices that haunt my dreams. But war crimes? No. I fought a war I did not start using the resources I had available to protect innocent lives. If that makes me a criminal, then justice has no meaning. Yuna sat down, her testimony complete. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then the chairman spoke, his voice subdued. This council will take a recess to consider what we have heard. We reconvene tomorrow. As the council members filed out, they looked shaken. The certainty of yesterday had crumbled. The simple narrative of a war criminal had become complicated with context and truth. In the gallery, a Vryn veteran slowly stood and bowed toward Yuna. Then another. Then more. Not all of them, but enough to make a statement. They understood, perhaps, what she had chosen not to do to them. Yuna left the chamber with the same calm she had entered it, but something had changed. The galaxy had seen the truth. Now they had to decide what to do with it. The chamber was silent except for the hum of translation devices. 7 alien species sat in judgment, their forms strange and varied under the cold lights of the Galactic Council. At the center of it all stood Captain Yuna Kim, her hands clasped behind her back, her face showing nothing. 50 years had passed since the war ended. 50 years since humanity fought for its survival against an enemy that came without warning. But the Council was not interested in history today. They wanted blood. Councillor Thelvos rose from his seat, his crystalline skin catching the light as his 4 eyes fixed on Yuna. He was Vryn, one of the species that had tried to wipe humanity from the stars. Now he stood as prosecutor, holding a data tablet that glowed with accusations. Captain Kim, his voice translated through the speakers, you are charged with crimes against sentient life. At the Battle of Proxima Station, your actions resulted in the deaths of 40,000 beings. You destroyed civilian vessels. You deployed weapons banned by galactic law. You showed no mercy. The gallery behind Yuna was packed. Humans sat on one side, their faces tight with anger. On the other side sat aliens from a dozen worlds, some who had lost family in the war. Media drones floated everywhere, recording everything for a galaxy that watched with held breath. Yuna said nothing. She had not spoken since entering the chamber 3 hours ago. Her silence made Thelvos angry, which showed in the way his skin pulsed with darker colors. Do you deny these charges? He demanded. Still, Yuna remained quiet. Her lawyer, a young man named Minho Park, sat at the defense table looking nervous. He was barely 30, fresh from law school, and he had volunteered to defend her when no one else would. Now he seemed to regret that choice. Thelvos activated the holographic display, the center of the chamber filled with images of destruction. Ships torn apart in the black of space, explosions that bloomed like flowers of death. The Battle of Proxima Station played out in terrible detail for everyone to see. This is your work, Thelvos said, pointing at the carnage. This is what humanity calls a hero. Yuna watched the display without flinching. She had seen these images before in her dreams every night for 50 years. She knew every ship, every explosion, every death that happened under her command. A murmur ran through the gallery. Some aliens nodded in agreement with the prosecutor. Some humans looked uncomfortable, seeing the reality of what their hero had done. Thelvos continued his presentation. He showed evidence of destroyed medical ships. He displayed communication logs that he claimed proved Yuna had ignored surrender signals. He brought up casualty lists that scrolled on, names of the dead in languages Yuna could not read. The defense may cross-examine, the council chairman said. He was a Torvek, a species known for fairness, but even he looked disturbed by what he had seen. Minho stood up, his legs shaking slightly. Councillor Thelvos, is it true that the Vryn attacked human colonies without declaring war? Irrelevant, Thelvos said quickly. We are here to judge Captain Kim's actions, not to retry the entire war. But context matters, Minho argued weakly. The law is clear, Thelvos interrupted. War crimes are war crimes, regardless of who started the conflict. Captain Kim's actions violated every principle of civilized warfare. The council members nodded. 3 of them were species that had been allied with the Vryn during the war. 2 others were neutral but seemed swayed by the evidence. Only the Torvek chairman and 1 other, a Silrim diplomat, seemed uncertain. Yuna finally moved. She turned her head slightly to look at Minho, and gave him a small nod. He sat down, looking defeated. Does the defendant wish to speak? The chairman asked. Everyone in the chamber leaned forward. The media drones moved closer. Even Thelvos seemed curious, his four eyes narrowing. Yuna cleared her throat. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady, carrying clearly through the translation systems. I request permission to present my own testimony at the next session. That was all she said. 13 words that somehow changed the atmosphere in the room. There was something in her tone, a quiet confidence that made even her accusers hesitate. Thelvos recovered quickly. The defendant thinks she can talk her way out of genocide. Let her speak. Let the galaxy hear her try to justify the unjustifiable. The chairman looked uncertain but nodded. The request is granted. We will reconvene tomorrow. Captain Kim, you will remain in custody until then. Security drones moved in as the council members filed out. Yuna allowed herself to be escorted from the chamber without resistance. As she passed through the gallery, she caught sight of familiar faces. Old soldiers she had served with, some missing limbs, all wearing their service medals. They stood in respect as she walked by. Outside the council building, protests had already started. Human veterans waved signs supporting Yuna. They chanted her name and her achievements. On the opposite side of the plaza, alien groups demanded justice for their dead. They carried pictures of loved ones lost in the war. Police drones kept the two groups apart, but barely. The tension was thick enough to cut. One wrong move and the protest could turn into a riot. Inside the detention center, Minho came to visit Yuna in her cell. It was a comfortable room, more like a hotel than a prison, but the force field at the door made it clear she was a prisoner. Why didn't you defend yourself? Minho asked, sitting across from her. You just stood there and let him destroy you. Yuna looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. Gray streaked her black hair now, and scars marked her hands from old battles. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. Because they're not ready for the truth, she said quietly. They want a monster to blame. They want someone to punish so they can feel like the universe makes sense. But you're not a monster, Minho protested. Yuna smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Tomorrow they'll learn what a real monster would have done. Tomorrow they'll understand the difference between winning a war and committing a war crime. She paused, looking at her scarred hands. Tomorrow I'll tell them why they're all still alive to judge me. Minho left confused and worried. Yuna sat alone in her cell, thinking about the next day. She had been silent for 50 years, carrying her burden alone. Tomorrow she would make them understand. Tomorrow they would learn the truth about Proxima Station and what she had chosen not to do. The galaxy wanted to judge her, fine. But first they needed to know what judgment really meant. The recess lasted 3 hours instead of overnight. The council claimed they needed time to verify Yuna's evidence, but everyone knew the real reason. Her testimony had destroyed the prosecution's case, and they needed to figure out what to do next. During the break, Yuna sat in her cell with Minho. The young lawyer was both excited and terrified. You could have told me about that evidence, he said. I could have presented it properly, built a better case. No, Yuna replied. If I had given you those files earlier, Thelvos would have had time to prepare counter-arguments. Surprise was necessary. Besides, this trial was never about justice. Minho looked confused. What do you mean? Before Yuna could answer, her communication device beeped. She activated it and a face appeared. A man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a slight smile. His name was Daehyun Choi and he looked pleased with himself. The files are in position, Daehyun said without greeting. Just waiting for your signal. What files? Minho asked, looking between them. Yuna smiled, a real smile this time. The ones that will end this trial properly. Daehyun, how much time do you need? Give me 20 minutes after the session starts. I need to break through their security without being traced. You have it. Yuna ended the call and turned to Minho. What I am about to tell you needs to stay confidential until it becomes public. Understand? Minho nodded slowly. This trial is a political attack, Yuna explained. Thelvos was not just a counselor. During the war, he was a military commander. He ordered the initial strikes on human colonies. The attacks that killed millions of civilians, including my younger brother Jiho. The lawyer's eyes widened. But that would mean, it means he is a war criminal accusing me to distract from his own crimes. It means this trial is about rewriting history. If he can make me the villain, then the Vryn can claim they were the victims. But why would the council allow this? Because some of them were paid to, Yuna said grimly. Daehyun has been investigating for months. He found evidence of bribes, political deals, agreements made in secret. 3 council members took money from Vryn interests to push this trial forward. Minho looked sick. That is corruption at the highest level. Yes, and in about 20 minutes the entire galaxy will know. When they returned to the chamber, the atmosphere had changed. The council members looked serious. The gallery was packed beyond capacity and security had been doubled. Something big was expected, though no one knew exactly what. The chairman called the session to order. The council has reviewed Captain Kim's evidence. We find it credible and properly sourced. However, questions remain about the proportionality of force used and the necessity of certain actions. Telvos stood immediately. The defendant admits to using banned weapons. She admits to mass destruction. Regardless of context, these actions violated galactic law. I move for immediate conviction. The council will deliberate, the chairman began. Before you do, Yuna interrupted, standing, I have new evidence to present. Evidence relevant to this trial's legitimacy. Telvos' skin flashed with annoyance. More fabricated files? More attempts to justify the unjustifiable? No, Yuna said calmly. Evidence about you, counselor. The chamber went quiet. Telvos' four eyes narrowed. What are you implying? I am not implying anything. I am stating a fact. You were Commander Telvos during the war. You led the attack fleet that destroyed New Sol Colony. You personally ordered the orbital bombardment that killed every human on that world, including women, children, and the elderly. Gasps filled the gallery. Telvos' skin went dark with rage. That is a lie. I was a junior officer, nothing more. Really? Yuna gestured and her display activated. These are Vryn military records obtained through legal channels after the war. They show your rank, your command assignments, your orders. The holographic display filled with documents, military service records showing Telvos' progression through the ranks, command logs with his signature, orders bearing his authorization code. New Sol Colony, Yuna read from one document. Commander Telvos authorizes complete saturation bombardment. No survivors to be left. Make an example that will break human resistance. The words echoed through the chamber. Even the other council members looked shocked. Telvos began to speak, but Yuna cut him off. Hanguk Station, Busan Outpost, Eden Prime Colony. All destroyed under your command. All civilian targets. All war crimes by any definition. You killed more innocents in a month than I did in the entire war. Telvos slammed his hand on the table. This trial is not about me. It is about justice, Yuna interrupted. Real justice, not political theater. And justice requires that we examine who is making accusations and why. At that moment, alarms began sounding throughout the council building. Security systems detected an intrusion in the computer networks. Technicians rushed to contain it, but they were too late. Across every screen in the chamber, new information appeared. Communications between Telvos and council members, financial transactions showing money transferred to accounts owned by counselors, secret agreements to push the trial forward regardless of evidence. Daehyun had struck perfectly. The timing could not have been better. One of the compromised council members, a Torvek named Resh, stood up angrily. This is a hack. This information was obtained illegally. Was it? Yuna asked. Or did someone leak it because they were tired of corruption? Either way, the information is real. Would you like to deny it under oath? Resh sat down without answering. The chairman looked at the document scrolling across the screens. His expression showed disgust. Counselor Telvos, is this true? Did you accept payments to prosecute this case? The source of funding is irrelevant, Telvos said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Captain Kim is still guilty of what? Shouted someone from the gallery. It was a human veteran missing an arm. Of saving Earth? Of stopping your genocide? Other voices joined in. The chamber descended into chaos again. Council members argued among themselves. 3 of them, the ones named in the leaked documents, tried to leave but found their way blocked by security. A woman appeared on the public screens throughout the building. She was a human journalist named Suji Han, and she looked directly into the camera with fierce determination. This is Suji Han reporting live. What you are seeing is evidence of the biggest political scandal in Galactic Council history. 3 council members took bribes to prosecute Captain Yuna Kim in a trial designed to rewrite the history of the Human-Vryn War. Her broadcast went out to every major network. Within minutes, it would reach billions across the galaxy. Suji continued her report. The prosecutor, Counselor Telvos, is himself a war criminal who ordered the deaths of millions of human civilians. This trial was never about justice. It was about one species trying to escape accountability for starting a war of extermination. The chamber was in complete disorder now. The chairman tried to restore order but failed. Council members shouted at each other. The corrupted councilors demanded the evidence be sealed. Others demanded their immediate resignation. Una stood calmly at the center of the storm, watching it all unfold exactly as she had planned. Minho looked at her with something like awe. You knew this would happen. You orchestrated everything. I learned from the war, Una replied. Sometimes the best strategy is to let your enemy destroy themselves. I just gave them the opportunity. Thelvos finally lost control completely. He rushed toward Una, screaming accusations in his native language that the translators struggled to convert. Security drones intercepted him before he could reach her, restraining him with force fields. You have ruined everything, he shouted at her. You were supposed to be punished. You were supposed to be an example. An example of what? Una asked quietly. Of how the defeated can be blamed? Of how history can be rewritten by the losing side? No, counselor. You wanted an example and you got one. Just not the one you expected. She turned to address the entire chamber. This is what I fought for. Not for victory. Not for glory. But for the truth to matter. For justice to be real. Not just a word used by the powerful to punish the weak. The chairman finally managed to restore order by threatening to clear the chamber. When silence returned, he looked exhausted and angry. This council is compromised. The trial is suspended pending investigation into these allegations. Councillor Thelvos, you are removed from your position and will face charges. The same applies to Councillors Resh, Voth, and Kelmar. Security moved in to detain the named councillors. Thelvos continued to scream threats and accusations as he was led away. The others went quietly, their shame evident. The chairman looked at Una. Captain Kim, you are released from custody. This trial is over. But Una shook her head. No, the trial continues. I want a verdict. I want the galaxy to formally acknowledge what happened here. Not just the corruption, but the truth about the war. The chairman hesitated. That will take time. New judges must be appointed. The evidence must be reviewed properly. I will wait, Una said. I have waited 50 years. I can wait a little longer.